All right, a little bit of a bumpy start there. Sorry about that. But welcome to my live stream, and we are going to continue today with working on my Longhorn Beetle. So this guy that I'm doing right now, and this is where I left off last week. So I'm going to be sculpting some more on this, getting into some detailing. Excuse me. So these are some photographs that I took of a dead beetle that I have in my collection, Longhorn Beetle. So these are the references that I'm using as I work on this sculpt. And I want to let everybody know that these reference images, I'm going to make them available if you want to download them and check them out, use them for your own creature exploration and that kind of thing. What I need you to do is a couple things. First, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel is, let me bring it up here real quick. It is Blue Patone. That's my my handle. Like I said, a little discombobulated today, but if you check out at Blue Patone right here. So check out Blue Patone on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel, and then check out my Instagram. My Instagram is bluepatone01. If you send me a direct message on Instagram, I'll send you a Dropbox link, and you can download all these cool references for free. So check that out, and let me get started here so I can start sculpting. And I'll pull up the chat. How come one of my ZBrush material disappeared? Not sure how to get it back. Is it the green metallic material? Not sure the exact name. It's gray on the model with some baked in lighting. Does ZBrush have a resource anywhere to download default materials that for some reason have gone missing? As far as default materials, I'm not sure, but of course you can do a Google search. Excuse me. Let's do this real quick because this is a frequent question. Let's look at matte cap materials dirty blue download. Since they took over the since Maxon took over the website, a lot of stuff has changed. So the matte cap library has moved around quite a bit. Let me copy and paste this into the chat. But here is where they have a lot of the matte caps, and I don't know if they have all the default ones in here, but they probably do. You might just have to hunt around a little bit in the metal library or some of the matte cap libraries. The other thing you can do is you could try initializing ZBrush and see if that brings back, basically resetting ZBrush to the factory settings. If you go to Preferences, and under config, you can try doing initialize ZBrush. I don't know if that's going to bring back all the materials, but you can always try and restore standard UI. That's going to restore the UI. Or let's see, another thing you can do is if you know where the Z startup materials are stored on the C drive, there's a couple places. So we go to C drive. Let's see, Z materials, let's see. If you go into your C drive and check out program files, Maxon ZBrush 2024, Z materials matte cap, it might be in here. So those are the things that I would suggest. You can also go into Z startup. If you go into Maxon Z startup, but usually Z startup is the material folder is empty. You just put some custom folders and materials in there. Like that's where I have my mod dirty blue. So check that out. But as far as the download default materials, that's the only thing I can think of. Yeah, the problem with the when I made a mistake last week when I was thinking that you could send direct messages on YouTube, but the other thing I could do is I'm just going to copy and paste the folder link, the link to Dropbox here into the comments. So if you want to download the material folder, I'll give you the link to that. Just give me 1 second here because I've got to go into Dropbox and find a link to the folder, and then I'll post a link. It's about 1 gigabyte, so it's fairly large. So let me copy this. And if you're on ZBrush 2022, see if there's a ZBrush 2022 folder, or it might still be in a Pixelogic folder. So if you want to download the the references that I'm using, I just posted a link into the YouTube chat. Let me go over to Twitch and do the same thing. So, reference. So you guys can download that. It's about 1 gigabyte, so it's fairly large. What I would say is, yeah, see if there's I usually have old, let's see if I have Maxon program files. Goes back to ZBrush 2023. Before 2023, it might be in a Pixelogic folder. So check out Pixelogic, ZBrush 2022, Z materials. Yeah, in 2022, they only have a few materials in there. And then Z startup. Yeah, this is what I have in my Z startup folder. So let's see. Let's see if we can do this. What I will do is, let me see the material. I'll get through this real quick and then we'll do some sculpting. Green metallic matte. Okay, so that would be this one right here. Send this real quick to the desktop. Let me see. Can I actually? I don't know if I can share files on the chat, but I'll give it a try. Yeah, it won't allow me to do that. For some reason, it's not in the file in my project. Yeah, I mean, the other thing you can do is select that material and then choose Save as Startup Material down here. See if that fixes the issue. Okay, so let me go into the sculpt here. And let me see if I still have my reference on here. I do. What I think I want to do is play with the legs a little bit. So let's see. So let's play with this. Okay, so I want to take a look at how this is. So this looks like it's still in kind of a Dynamesh kind of state from last time. So I'm going to up the resolution a little bit. And I'm going to work in Dynamesh for a little while. And then once I'm kind of happy with it, I'll kind of like do a Z-remesh. But it might be a good idea to start splitting these legs into different segments. So let's see what the joints look like for these legs. So I'm going to turn on solo. Every time I say solo, I hear Jabba the Hutt's voice for some reason. Let's do this. We can. One cool thing you can do. Yeah, I can separate this into separate parts. And since I have Dynamesh on, I'm going to Control-Shift-Click on this just to isolate those parts. Control-W, so it's its own polygroup. So this is a separate polygroup, and this is a separate polygroup. So I'm going to turn on groups and then re-Dynamesh again. And when I do that, that actually separates the surfaces into segments. So you can see it's created some separation between those polygroups because I had that groups button on. So now I can treat these as separate segments and just do a little bit of smoothing there. This one, I don't know if I wanted to have that separated. So I'll just do this, Control-Shift-Click on that once, twice again, and I'll do Modify Topology, Delete Hidden to get rid of it. And then you can see our polygroups there. Excuse me. And let's make sure we're facing the right way. So we have kind of like, it's like, this is the coaxer right here, and it's like kind of like an orb, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to bring up the, actually let's do Move Topological. I'll just start shaping this. And then we can see we have this kind of plate that comes over top of it. Beetle legs are like, Beetle legs are the coolest, I think. Some of the coolest that you'll find in when it comes to insects, because you get some really weird shapes, especially the beetles that fold up into tiny little balls and that kind of stuff. It's really amazing how mechanical they are, and they have all these weird strategies for folding them up. One of the hardest models that I ever tried to do was this little beetle, like a roly-poly beetle that folds up into a perfect little ball. And it was really hard because it's like, if you can try modeling it, do you model it with the legs out or do you model it with the legs all balled up? It's like you can make an argument either way. But I had to like get a few dead versions of this beetle and then soak it in hot water so that it would actually open up. And then only open up for a little while. The minute it dried up, it would close back in again. It was impossible to open. Really weird beetle, very difficult to model. Never quite satisfied with how it came out, so I might have to give it another try at some point. So I'm creating this kind of lip in here. The other thing I'm going to do is, you can see these are separate polygroups. I also have mask by polygroups. I have this slider, which is normally found under brush auto masking. This slider right here, I put it down here because I like to use it a lot. So if I put it up to 100, then oh, so we're using the wrong legs. I should be looking at these legs, not this legs. Whoops. Well, kind of similar. But that way I can use a regular move brush. It doesn't matter, but it's a nice way to kind of keep the parts separate even when they're the same subtool. So this one is almost more triangular, and it's got this kind of lip right there. That's kind of wild. A lot of times what I'll have to do if I'm using photographic reference, I mean I have the beetle, it's just not right in front of me right now, but I'm going to kind of get as close as I can while still being rough to say a couple different images, and then with the understanding that as I go along I'm probably going to have to go back and fix a few things because it's hard to get right the first time when you're just looking at one view, especially when things are out of focus and stuff is in front of each other and everything. And so this is kind of like a rough approximation of what I need to do here. So re-Dynamesh just to get some more geometry in there, or sometimes I'll use like Sculptris Pro. In this case I think I'm just going to stick to Dynamesh. I might up the resolution a little bit though. Yeah, there we go. So we get this kind of shape, and it'll go like a clay brush. The Z intensity down a little bit. Okay, bring this back and start to see if we can fit that in here a little bit. I mean, the cool thing about doing insects, especially if you're interested in creature design, is just working on all these different shapes and really spending time, as opposed to just like kind of like glancing at some images online and getting the gist of it. To really try hard to like sculpt insects accurately, the amount of information you get for future creature designs is just invaluable. But taking the time to actually struggle through it and try and understand these shapes is really worth it. So my analogy would be like way back in the day, back when I used to be a musician, and I spent a lot of time long before they had Guitar Hero and all that kind of stuff, when we used to try and figure out songs just by listening to cassettes or vinyl records. So we sit there next to a vinyl record and drop the needle and try and learn it, and use a tape cassette and rewind it and break a lot of tapes, and you couldn't really slow it down or anything like that. You just had to like listen to it over and over again and try and figure out what they were doing. And tried to learn a lot of Jimi Hendrix solos that way, and it was a lot of fun because even if you got stuff wrong, you still learned a lot. You know what I mean? Because and every once in a while you just like pick up a lick by somebody like Jimi Hendrix or whoever that you really like, and that one lick you could just use a million times and on a million different ways just by adjusting it and playing with it. So all the time that you spend trying to figure it out and trying to work out what the actual music is time well spent, because it just gives you just this inspiration, and you play it enough, you find ways to work it into your own guitar solos and that kind of stuff. So working on insects and any kind of animals, obviously working on humans is really valuable, but no offense to character artists, but you guys have a lot more reference imagery and information to work with, because when you think about it, we've been talking about drawing and sculpting humans literally for thousands of years. So there's thousands of years worth of reference and study and thought and lectures and all that kind of stuff on human beings, because gosh, aren't we great? We are human beings, right? We're the best thing on the planet, according to us anyways. But not so much for insects. We've only really understood insect anatomy for a few hundred years, because before that it's really kind of hard to see because they're small, and we're still learning everything every day. And also insects don't really follow beyond a few basic commonalities, like they have 6 legs and a thorax and an abdomen and compound eyes and that kind of stuff. There isn't a whole lot in common from one insect to another. The basic body plan is there, but if you compare an ant to a beetle, you're going to see that even though you can see the basic body plan, it's still the amount of variation is just kind of staggering. So it's worth it to kind of really get down and dirty and try and do what I'm doing here, because like I say, even if you get stuff wrong, you'll still get some great ideas, and getting in there, really paying attention to what you're doing pays off like you would not believe. And so what am I doing here? So we've got this kind of thing. So I'm trying to get this right here with this kind of lip, just maybe roughly. I don't think that's exactly right, but it's there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and work on this right here, because this is a really interesting shape. And the way it kind of fits in here. I need to pull this down a little bit. This is also why I'm going to work in Dynamesh for a while, because I know I don't quite have the shape right just yet. And once I do, and I'm feeling confident about it, then I'll go in and do like some retopology. Usually with Z-Remesh at first, and then if I really need to, I'll go in and do a hand retopology with Z-Modeler, or in extreme cases, I will go into like Maya and use Quadra. I don't do that as much anymore because Z-Modeler is actually pretty good. And also Z-Remesh is actually a lot better than it used to be, so you can get away with a lot more. So we have kind of this right here. So let's do a little step back and see if we can get this hook in here in the right place. And let's also make sure we're looking at it at the right angle. So we have kind of like this. It's probably a bit big. And it's also a different angle. It's kind of like that. Like this. Thanks, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. I love these weird little hooks, man. So one of the questions I need to research is, why does this particular beetle have such insanely long front legs, right? I mean, the front legs are just ridiculous. Usually the answer to that question, from what I've learned, and I haven't studied this particular beetle enough to really say for sure, but what I've found is usually the answer for why they have exaggerated body parts is it's almost always for jousting with other males. So I don't know if this is a male or not, but I'm assuming it probably is. But a lot of times, you know, beetles get competitive over territory, and they get competitive over mates. They're usually guarding territories so that they can attract a mate. So it always comes down to that, you know what I mean? So my guess is that, you know, usually if it's like these really exaggerated huge body parts that are just don't seem practical anymore, usually mating is the reason. If you look at stalk-eyed flies, which are these flies that have these eyes way out on the ends of large stalks, and they actually inflate these out, right? You can actually watch them inflate the eyes out, and that's something you can see on lots of nature documentaries. I've actually seen a few in the wild and taken some pictures of them. I actually have a picture on my wall right here of a stalk-eyed fly. They're really cool, but the whole reason they do that, I always assumed, oh, well, you know, maybe it aids in their vision and allows them to fly better or something. It's like, nope. It's because their territory for stalk-eyed fly is almost always like a single, like, weed. Like, honestly, like almost like a leaf. They're guarding a leaf. That's their territory. Then another male comes to their territory. They joust and fight the other males for dominance. And whoever's left standing gets to hang on to territory, and therefore ends up getting to mate. So that's sexual selection for you, as opposed to, we usually think in terms of competition, in terms of, you know, who gets to eat more, what traits allow them to dominate, you know, prey or whatever. But sexual selection usually is related to the ability to procreate, whatever advantage they had to procreate. So, interesting concept there. It's what love makes you do, man. Makes you do crazy things. Makes you grow out eyes in the end of long stalks, or if you look at, you know, like a lot of stag beetles and that kind of stuff, they have the crazy body parts, and that's usually the reason. There's a really great book that I love called, it's a short book, it's like Animal Weaponry. Let me see if I can pull up a link to it, because it's something that everyone should have in their library. If you're a fan of doing any kind of creature design based on evolutionary principles, let me see. This book right here, by Douglas J. Emlyn. It's a short book, but it's a really cool book, and it's worth having in your library. And the reason is that this guy is a fan of both evolutionary biology, specifically insects, but he is also a fan of studying the history of human weaponry. And he never thought about writing a book that compares animal weaponry to human weaponry until a friend of his suggested it. Then it seemed extremely obvious. It's like, of course, his two main interests work perfectly well together. So it's a great book to read in that. If you're a creature designer, I would say it's an absolute must to have. And it's worth reading. It's a short book, but you get so many great ideas from it. There's a lot of stuff about beetles in there and that kind of stuff. So it's worth checking out. So this is a little bit on the lumpy side, and I also want to have this nice kind of line right there that almost forms like a groove. So let's look at the other end of this so that we can have something sort of consistent. So this is almost like a square. Put a groove in there like that. Let's do this. Let's get a little bit more of a longer lazy radius. This. Something like that. And then of course we're going to have to do the other side as well, but I don't have an image of that at the moment. So I'm going to do a little bit of a clay polish here just to neaten things up. And I'm going to hide this and this part. Go in here and do clay polish. This way to quickly neaten things up. And let me go in here with a little bit of clay tubes and just do that. So then we consider this kind of just a rough blocking at the moment. I think this could be a little bit improved in terms of getting the direction right. Right, because it kind of comes down into this groove like that. So it's interesting that if you look at it from this angle, I mean, so this spike right here is coming from the other side, right here. And then if you look at the negative space right there, and then there's a little bit of a negative space right there. It's a very interesting shape. You know, I don't know if this is something that helps the beetle like just climb up trees and that kind of stuff. Sometimes that's the case. I know with like a lot of wasps and other insects, a lot of the spikes there are almost like the spikes you use in cleats or whatever, or mountain climbing shoes. But it could also be so that they can, you know, pinch someone or catch someone or fight off another male or whatever. So the tough part is kind of figuring out this right here is the bottom side of right there. It's not this. That's the part that gets confusing. And I think this shape could be improved a little bit. Let's go in here and play with this a little bit. And let's, of course, save next. Yeah, cleaning the antenna is a good suggestion. I know with bees and wasps, they have that little groove in their forelegs that they definitely use for cleaning antenna. Yeah, insect-based creature design. Yeah, I have my pet peeves for things that I see that people do wrong, and what I'm hoping to do when I get a chance is to do like a YouTube video of, like, the top 10 mistakes that creature designers make when they do insectoid or insect based designs. The biggest I find, and I said this last week, is when people don't take advantage of how awesome insect eyes are when they just kind of phone it in. Like they do like a grid, or they don't even do compound eyes. I'm like, wow, what a wasted opportunity, because insect eyes are so cool and they're so incredibly different than human eyes, and they have such a great design element to them. I mean, let's look at the eyes on this little bugger. It's like the eyes here actually wrap around the antenna, which I see in a lot of beetles. That's something that I think, this is where the eyes are right here, and you can see they actually wrap around. This is upside down, so that's the mouth. The other one that bothers me a lot is when you see people doing sort of fleshy muscles, you know what I mean, on top of it. There are some insects like flies and others that do have fleshy bits, and obviously like larva is gooey and fleshy and that kind of thing. But at the same time, they are arthropods, and that means they have an exoskeleton. So when I see kind of like human-like muscles, unless it's like meant to be, like if you look at like, Cronenberg's The Fly, the movie, well, that's a human being turning into a fly. So you want to have kind of a combination. And in that sense, I think it's okay. But when they just make a muscly person with a few insect elements, I think that's kind of lame. Mouth parts and mandibles are another one that I think is underutilized, because insects have such cool mouth parts. I haven't worked on my mouth parts. This guy's kind of goofy at the moment, but you can see the eyes. I'm starting to block them in there. The other thing is antenna placement is really interesting, because what I've found is that most insects usually have their antenna lower on the face. And this is an exception where the antenna are like right in the middle of the eyes here, or at the upper part of the eyes. But with some, you usually have the antenna coming out lower than the eyes. And when you do that, they look creepy. If you want to make a bug look cute, move the antenna up. I mean, look at this guy. He actually looks a little bit cute, partially because he has this goofy mouth. But it's also because the antennae are higher up on the head. If you look at some ants really closely, their antennae tend to be lower than the eyes. And that's one of the things that makes them look really, really creepy. So if you want to do creepy, make your antennas lower. If you want to do cute, make your antennas higher. It's like a kind of a rule. Another thing that I see is like missed opportunity is legs, and specifically feet. If you just graft on a human hand here, I mean, that's kind of boring, right? But look at how wild the feet are, all these different segments and that kind of stuff. So I think here's the upper part of this same leg. So you can go check that out in a second. So those are some of my pet peeves. Yeah, I have a love for ecology. It's something I wish I'd studied when I was in school, when I was in college. Like if I could go back and redo it, everything. I ended up studying music when I was in college, which was not useful. But not that I regret it. I love studying music. But if I had to do it again, I'd go back and study ecology, because it really is a fascinating subject. And one of my pet peeves, and I'm sure this must drive every ecologist crazy, is when you hear tech bros use the term ecosystem, especially when they're talking about business and all this kind of stuff. It drives me freaking crazy, because they're talking about a brand or a line of products, and so they love to throw out ecosystem to sound smart. And every time they do that, I'm just like, oh, you want to talk about ecosystems? Tell me about adaptive radiation. Talk to me about, all the other stuff that's that is involved in an actual ecosystem and how incredibly complex they are. I think one ecologist said it's not that ecosystems are too complex for humans to figure out. It's just they're too complex. We'll never understand them. They're impossible to. I mean, if you could grasp an entire ecosystem and everything that functions into it over time, it's too complex for the human brain to actually contemplate, which I think is really cool. Yeah, mouth parts are hard. I did do some on my YouTube channel. I have a few videos dedicated to mouth parts, but it's something I'm still studying. The other thing that I'm studying that I need to learn a lot more about is wing muscles. I'm still struggling with wing muscles on like dragonflies and stuff, just because they're really complex and it's hard to find a good reference. Because you're either dealing with an illustration, 2D illustration, which means you are immediately influenced by the bias of whoever drew the illustration in the first place. So if they got something wrong, then that mistake is going to appear in your work as well. Or if you're looking at photographs like this, it's not always easy. This one is a little bit more straightforward, but if you look at like hairy bees and that kind of stuff, well, the mouth parts here are a good example. Like, it's a nice image until you zoom in here and you're just like, oh God, what is going on here? It's just a total mess. One of the things that I was working on was trying to do an accurate orchid bee mouth. And so I wanted to compare it with honeybee mouths. And even then, just modeling an accurate honeybee mouth is a real challenge. And one of I think the most helpful thing is to get a hold of some scan data if you can. With honeybees, it's a little bit easier because they're more commonly studied insect. But scan data can be helpful, although then again, you're scanning a lot of schmutz, and if they're dead, they're all shriveled up and that kind of thing. So that's still a challenge. So sometimes I wonder if we'll ever actually truly understand it because, we're filtering it through our own brain and our own biases. So it's hard to really figure out what's going on for sure. But mouth parts are really cool. Mosquito mouth parts are some of the most heinous. Also ticks. I mean, they're arachnids, but if you look at a tick mouth part, it's just pure evil. People, when hippies start talking about how much love there is in nature, I'm just like, go study a tick's mouth parts and you can change your mind real quick. Nature has a freaking bad attitude. I heard of this guy who had a parasite in his brain and it ate part of his brain and it died. A real life brain sucker. And believe it or not, that guy ran for president and everyone thought he was crazy. Sorry, am I talking about politics? Anyways, nature is crazy. It'd be cool to find out if the country was actually run by a parasite in somebody's brain. Well, conspiracy theories. I'm just getting into trouble here. There's a really great movie called Brain Damage from the 80s. Some guys who made Basket Case. It's almost like a sequel to Basket Case. Well, it's not a sequel, but it's in the same cinematic universe as Basket Case, and it's all about this parasite that lives in this guy's brain, and the parasite's name is Aylmer. It's great lines in that movie. It's a perfect midnight movie. One thing that's kind of sad about the times that we live in is when I was growing up, back in the old days, I'm Gen X, so I appreciate the old days of midnight movies, is that all movies now, even movies without much of a budget, have at very least decent special effects. When I was a kid, one of the greatest things about bad movies was really terrible special effects. It's one of those things that gave a movie a lot of charm and made it fun to watch and make fun of. Now it's just like, since almost anyone can afford halfway decent special effects relative to what we saw when I was growing up, I mean, obviously audiences are more picky now. The halfway decent special effects can really cover up what is otherwise a god-awful movie. So I miss the days of bad special effects. Yeah, I think the orchid bee still needs some detail on the mouth parts to get it actually correct. I have some papers, some scientific papers that I've found and people sent me. It's just a matter of finding time to getting in there and really working on it. But that's one of my favorite bees. There's so many cool bees too. There's a bunch more that I really want to get into. Basically, I have a folder on my hard drive that's organized based on taxonomy. So all the subfolders are based on the orders and the suborders and all that kind of stuff. So I think mostly what I have is Hymenoptera, Coleoptera, a few others. Well, I have a lot of insect models, but those are the ones that I've done the most on. Okay, I think I'm screwing this. I'm making this worse. This is kind of not going the way that I want. So let's do this. We'll move it down and re-dynamesh at a lower resolution. That's too low. That's too low. There we go. I'm going to leave this like this for now. Let's see. Okay. Let's do this. Let's save next. Whoops. And I'm going to go work on another part just so my eyes get a rest on this part, because I think I'm starting to obsess about things and it's actually changing the model and adding some errors in there. Do you have any tips for what to study in hard surface modeling? Cars? Hard surface modeling, I do some. I like insects because they're kind of a combination of hard surface and organic modeling. But one thing you can do that's kind of fun is get yourself like a Chilton's guide to a car that you really like. You know, Chilton's guide has the engines completely disassembled and all the various parts, and start going through it and pick some stuff to model. Practice is the best way to do it, as with everything. But there's a lot of, like, you know, really great videos. Paul Gabry does some really great videos on YouTube. He's a great person to study for hard surface modeling. And also Kermiko, my friend Ara, who also is a live streamer, does a lot of hard surface stuff. The mech guys are always good to study. Like I say, insects are nature's mech. The different type of detailing though. Okay, so I think this is, take our, The other thing, I don't have it set up, but I also have a stereoscopic microscope that can sometimes help being able to actually see it through a microscope, but also have that stereoscopic vision so you can see it in 3D. That can be really helpful. Real quick, I want to plug my YouTube channel, Bloopatone. Check it out. Please subscribe. I'm trying to build it up finally after many years of kind of languishing with just a few videos. I'm starting to add a whole bunch more videos on here, including some of the time lapses that I've done on Whip Scorpion, on scorpions, and then some of the stuff related to the live stream that I've done. I have a whole bunch of stuff. Here's one on beetle mouth parts, on the bee mouth anatomy. I need to go back and redo that because I've learned a few things since then that I need to fix. But I also have a whole bunch of stuff on this rainbow scarab beetle that I modeled a few years ago. I'm going to go back and kind of re-edit these sometime at the next coming week. But a lot of cool stuff there on beetle anatomy. And I go that one, I go all the way from ZBrush through to Substance to actually rendering in Redshift. So check out my YouTube channel, Bloopatone, and please subscribe. And if you subscribe and you want, well, I actually posted a link to the reference files in Dropbox. I mean, in the chat earlier. But you can always send me, follow me on Instagram, Bloopatone01. Send me a direct message, and I'll send you a link to the Dropbox folder where you can get this reference if you didn't get it in the chat earlier. And then I also do have some courses on Udemy that I want to quickly plug. And of course also the Gnomon Workshop. I'm working on a new series for the Gnomon Workshop on the UV toolkit in Maya 2025. And then of course I also have my Gnomon videos on insects and spiders. 1 second here real quick. So I have demystifying ZBrush materials, hot and new. Talking, and I just released it a few weeks ago. It goes through making standard materials, matcap materials, redshift materials, and all the various settings in the material palette. So check that one out. It's brand new. And I also have two for jewelry designers because I do jewelry design as well. This is the fundamentals. So this is basically a course on all the fundamentals of ZBrush, but geared towards printing for casting jewelry and that kind of thing. And then there's also understanding ZBrush geometry. So in this one, I break down the differences between Dynamesh and Nanomesh and parametric 3D objects and subdivision surfaces, dynamic subdivisions, and all that kind of stuff. So each chapter kind of breaks down, and I give some tips on when to use it. Because a lot of people starting out with ZBrush are always asking me, when do I use Dynamesh? When do I use Sculptress? When do I use subdivision surfaces? Is there an actual pipeline? So I think understanding how they work and how they relate to each other is the best way to go about designing your own pipeline for using those kinds of things. So check those out on Udemy, and also my, then of course my website is bloopatone.com. And my portfolio, and there you go. So thanks for letting me plug there for a second. And I'm going to be adding more YouTube videos in the future. And of course I do the live stream once a week. This month I'm doing it on Thursday evenings, Pacific time. Okay, the other thing we want to do is let's check the floor and see if I've strayed too much from my reference. So we could do a little bit of moving around here. It depends on how much, the head's getting a little bit big. So things are getting a little bit out of whack. Let me see, do I have perspective on by any chance? No. Let's do a little bit of adjustment here. Let's lock. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Then lock the screen so that it doesn't keep happening. It's a little bit tough because I'm using this as orthographic reference, but of course my photographs are in perspective because they're actual 3D objects, the real world. So I'm going to take this with a little bit of grain of salt, not be too obsessive. You know, I mean, the problem with doing if I was going to set this up correct, I'd use like a telephoto lens and take a picture of it from across the room. But that's not an easy setup. I don't have a setup like that. So if I really wanted to get an orthographic reference image of an insect, let's see if I've screwed that up too much. It's not too bad. It's, you know, kind of lumpy right now, but eventually when I do a Z-remesh and create levels of subdivision, then it'll be easier to smooth this stuff out. Of course, I can hit it with the H-polish brush and clay polish to kind of fix that. Okay, I think I was adjusting from the wrong view. That's no good. Let's go back a little bit. I mean, it looks cool. I don't know if it's right, but it looks cool. Okay, let's go over here and play with this a little bit. Sometimes when I get so like lost in the weeds on some of these parts, I'm amazed I ever get anything done, but it almost always pays off. It's one of these things where you nudge and nudge and nudge and play with it, and suddenly, all of a sudden, you get it right, and then you're like, what was I so worried about? That's interesting. I think that actually might be on the tibia. So this is the femur right here. Let's see. Let's take a look. So you have kind of like a groove right there. Yeah, that's definitely in the tibia. So it looks like there's kind of a groove where it's coming out a little bit there. You can't have enough images. It's impossible to have too many reference images. Let's see. Well, as of right now, I think that this little spike looks like it's part of this and not this. So that's what I'm going to go with for now until I decide otherwise. We get the mask lasso here and yeah, I think everything we started ZBrush, we start to detail like this. We're like, oh, why isn't that perfect? It's like you never get anywhere. You have to remind yourself to take a step back and work on the larger pieces and drill down. And so this, I think everybody does that. When they first started using ZBrush, they're like, why is my model 750 million polygons? It's like, it's because you're zoomed in too close and you're obsessing over molecular details. You don't need to have that much geometry. It's always a good idea to keep in mind where you think the model is going to go in the end. One thing that I definitely going to do, it's on my to-do list, is to take a lot of my insect models and start converting them to something that I can shade in Unreal, because the shading tools in Unreal, of course, have gotten a lot better with the newer version 5.4. I've just peeked in there and I haven't really had a chance to explore in it yet. But that's something I'd like to do, because it's always a fun challenge to do a model for real-time rendering. And I've done a few for like Unity and some VR stuff and everything, and so I've done a few decent ones, and some of them actually came out quite well. Even they don't even look, they're pretty low poly, but they don't look low poly at all, thanks to ZBrush and also Substance and Marmoset too sometimes. So I like to go and start taking some of my models and doing that, because also the animation tools in Unreal are getting really good, which is great, because it's no fun to kind of try and animate everything in Maya and then send it out as an FBX and cross your fingers that you got everything right. It seems like Unreal is basically going to start dominating, maybe take the place of Maya in the very least. I mean, I've been using Maya for well over 20 years now. I wouldn't say that I love Maya the same way that I love ZBrush. You know, I love ZBrush because I have a feel for it and I just understand it, and I've kind of grown with an artist as it's grown, so I really like it, and I like the people who create ZBrush. Maya I've been using for a long time because that's the first one that I learned, and it was the one that got me the most work when I came to Hollywood, Los Angeles, but I don't have any particular love for it. And I do not feel like Autodesk has that much love for its customers either. I'm sure there are small enclaves within Autodesk that actually give a crap, but I don't get that sense from them. So I like companies that seem to give a crap about their users. Don't you? Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. Now, I don't know how much good reference I have for that foot up there. So, what I'm going to do is take a break from this leg and maybe move it on to something else, like these guys down here. Let's save next. I'm going to take a very short 5-minute break and I will be right back. Okay. Beer has been acquired, so we can continue. Would I recommend rigging them in Unreal or animation done in another? Okay, that's a great question because I've been rigging my insects in Maya for years and years and years, and I'm just now starting to make the transition to learning Unreal. In fact, I got a motion capture set up, not for bugs, but for people. So I would like to start rigging my bugs in Unreal, but I have not tried it yet. So I will have to get back to you on that. But anything that shortens the pipeline, I think is a good thing. So I'm going to try doing that. Like I say, I do a decent job of rigging. I wouldn't say it's my specialty. I'm much more in modeling, texturing, and animation. But I have, my own tricks for rigging bugs that are pretty good. So I'd like to get into to doing that in Unreal eventually, so I don't have to do as much exporting from Maya and that kind of thing. I mean, honestly, I'm also learning Blender when I get a chance here and there, because I also think that's a big part of the future as well. More and more studios are using it. The other thing I have not tried is ZBrush on the iPad, which I think is coming out real soon. Like, they just started announcing it or showing images from it, so I think it's imminent if it hasn't come out already. So that should be interesting. I'm going to dig up an old iPad, but I'll probably have to get a new one. let's see. I'm going to split hidden. So I just hid the foot there. Excuse me. I'm going to go down to, once my brain restarts, I'm going to go back to geometry, modify topology. No. Yes. No, I want to be in subtool. Sorry, my brain totally stopped. Subtool, split hidden, just to make that foot a separate subtool. Because what I'm going to do now is, let me do a few little small adjustments on the end of the tibia here, and then I'm going to do a Z remesh so I can kind of neaten it up a little bit. Let's see. Find my reference here. A little bit of an inflate, and just a little bit of negative inflate. Go down here to geometry and Z remesh. I'm going to keep groups. Let's set this to adaptive. How heavy is this right now? 66,000 points. So it's not very heavy. So we'll set it to like 50,000 points. Actually, the other thing I want to do is I want to undo. Control click on the undo history. And then I'm going to set this to half. And Z remesh again. Just do it a few more times to a subtool. Project history, geometry, Z remesh again. Get it down to like this. I think that's okay for now. You know, we could get it lower if we really wanted to, but I think that's okay. I probably lost our little spikety. That's okay, we can bring it back. We'll do another projection, project history. Yeah, there's a little spiky. Let's pull them out. And subdivide. Project history. Subdivide again. And just do a little smoothing here. And maybe I'll do like a clay polish. So let's go Shift D a couple times and smooth this out a little bit. D for subdivide. And I'm going to go in here and do SK cloth and just give that look a little bit better. Just going to make it a little bit less lumpy. very lumpified right there. Then we'll go in here and do geometry, clay polish, just to give it a little bit, tighten it up just a little bit. And there we go. So I'm going to leave that for where it is right now. Come back and do some detailing later. Let's save next. How to get a break in Hollywood if someone is from a developing nation. Okay. And then I have a question. I'm trying to find a game to make mods. What game can you recommend to make arts on ZBrush? That's a tough one for me to answer because I've never really done that before. I would say that's a good question for folks who are on ArtStation or in the game area. As far as breaking into Hollywood, that's a tough question too, because the irony is if you're from a developing nation, Hollywood movies a lot of time we're outsourcing a lot of our animation and visual effects to other countries. So when I worked at Bad Robot, when I was working on Star Trek Beyond, we were doing a lot of the initial stuff, and then almost all the work was shipped overnight to Korea, which obviously is not a developing nation, but it was shipped overseas to other countries for other studios to work on, and then they ship it back the next day, and then we finish it and go back and forth like that. So VFX really is kind of like a global industry. It's tough to say getting a break in Hollywood because that's like a starlet actor term that doesn't really make any sense in the actual industry. The actual industry here in Los Angeles is very much freelance. So that means it's like, so I've worked on a bunch of movies. How did I get those jobs? Because I knew somebody. And how often do I get to pick a job that I work on? Almost never. It's just because of the association that I have, the people that I've worked with for years, and we work well together, and I know them, so that's how I end up getting jobs. So it's really just doing more work and getting to know people, making connections, working on small films, even if it's for not a whole lot of money, and if it's an indie project, it's not a bad way to start making connections, because what you're trying to do is make connections with other people who work in the industry so that somebody out there can say, hey, that guy's really good at doing this. I enjoyed working with him. You should hire him. So let me give you a typical scenario of what happens in a studio. And this even happens with some of the larger studios. I can't speak for ILM or Disney that have HR departments and blah, 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 those large corporations. But I can talk about small to medium large studios. A job comes in, they win a bid, they're working on, I don't know, maybe it's a trailer for a video game, maybe it's some VFX shots for a movie, whatever. We need somebody who's a good ZBrush sculptor. We need somebody who's a good texture artist. We need somebody who's a good rigging person. The first thing that will happen is that once the higher-ups have had the meeting, they've determined we need to hire these many people. One person will go to HR. HR will put out a notification on the internet. We're hiring, blah, 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 these people. The producers, the art directors, the visual effects supervisors, they will go out, and either they have a list of people that they've worked on with for over the past few years, and if they don't, or if none of those people are available, they're going to go out to the artists that are currently working in the studio, and they're going to say, hey, we need a ZBrush artist, or we need a texture artist. Who do you know that's good? And I will say, oh, I worked with this person, they're really good, see if they're available. I'll give a list of recommendations, and this is how I get jobs. Somebody that I've worked with, or maybe it was a former student of mine, or maybe a former teacher of mine, whatever, somebody I've had a relationship with somewhere will say, you should hire Eric, he's really good, see if he's available. I get an email in my email box from such and such studio, hey, are you available? Can we put you on hold? So the point being is, that, those HR people that put out a notification on social media, that's if they can't find anybody else. The first people that they're going to pick up for a job are people that know people. In other words, some artist at the studio says, I know somebody, here's a list, hire these people. There's also people have a list of people not to hire. Somebody comes up to me with a list of people and say, do you know these guys? And I see a list of somebody that I've worked with before that was a pain in the butt. Even if they were a great artist, but they were a nightmare to work with, I was like, do not hire that person. They suck. And I'm sure somebody's probably said that about me. I hope not, but we all have our biases. So the important thing, and what I'm trying to say in this long, never-ending lecture, is the relationships that you make with artists, whether it's in a school, whether it's online, or whether it's on a job, that's how you're going to get your jobs. So maintain those relationships. Be careful who you talk bad about. If you talk bad about somebody and they hear about it, you never know if that person is going to be the person doing hiring. You know what I mean? There's plenty of times when I've been really angry at somebody and thought I should just send them an email and tell them off and give them my 2 cents. And I didn't do that. And a year later, they hired me for some job because I actually managed to control my temper and not get pissed off at them or whatever. There's a few times where I've said things that I've regretted saying. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here. That's way too long. So, how do you get your big break in Hollywood? Make relationships with people, even if they're people in other countries. Work on indie films. Work on, do anything. Just as more connections you can make. Even if you're working on competitions, an art station, or whatever, it's fine. You just want people to know who you are and what you do, and that you're a good person to work with. So that's what I'm going to leave it. Resumes, demo reels, all that kind of stuff, IMDb listings, that's all icing on the cake. The main thing is the relationships you make with other people. Do I render my things on I use a number of renders. I use Redshift for Maya. I used to work for Otoy, so I used Octane back in the day a lot, but I also like Redshift. I like Keyshot. If you notice, you watched my last live stream, I did rendering in Redshift in ZBrush. I've used Modo in the past. I've used Marmoset. Unreal is something I want to do more of. But right now, Redshift is my main thing, and I do like it. I think it's great, but I really want to get into more real-time stuff because that's the future. Okay, sorry, I went on and talked for way too long. Now it's time to do some sculpting. So let's look at the thorax a little bit. I wonder if I should think about separating the thorax from the abdomen. Let's take a look. I think I should. I think that's enough justification right there that I should do that. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to do a split. I like to do split hidden. Make different subtools. And then let's go down here. And I'm going to Dynamesh so it closes that. I cannot increase mesh count for, well, how many points do you have in that model? It might be something like maybe you might have a mask applied to your model that you're not seeing that's preventing it from being subdivided. You always want to check things like that. Something might be hidden that you forgot about. So clarity mask, make sure nothing's hidden. And then also, I rarely divide a individual subtool beyond like maybe 20-30 million is about as high as I usually go. It gets to be overkill after that. That's my own bias. Different artists have different opinions on that. Okay, so I think I'm going to work on this part right here. So, let's see. It'd help if I turn on the button. And let's go to inflate. The other good way to get jobs in Hollywood or VFX is the expensive route, but going to a school. I mean, one of the huge advantages that Noman has, or Noman students have, is that Noman has, and many schools do, is Dave still around? Many schools do. They have a placement program, so they have a staff whose job it is to help you get a job in the industry, because it only makes the school look good. So they have a strong incentive to do that. And so I know a lot of, getting a job is one thing, keeping a job is something, that's the hard part. And that sometimes you have no control over that. There's layoffs and all kinds of other things. When I worked at Bad Robot, it was such an awesome experience, but the minute they finished Star Trek Beyond, they were like, we're closing down our visual effects department completely. So J.J. Abrams wanted to focus on writing and directing. I'm not going to make any comments, but we all know how that turned out. Rise of Skywalker. So it was kind of unfortunate because I really enjoyed working there. And I got to do a few cool projects, but then they decided to go a different direction. So you have no control over that, and we have no control over layoffs and the economy and AI and all that kind of stuff. So it's a precarious business. Like I said last week, visual effects is not something to get into if you enjoy. If you need to have a steady income and a regular job, and that's a goal you have in life, then visual effects is not going to be the career for you. Unless you get into more like IT side where you're helping the infrastructure, building pipelines and that kind of stuff, scripting and those kinds of things. But being an artist is tough, because sometimes you're just like, you see like these great works by people who are like experts in like hair grooming and that kind of stuff. They're really like the best at grooming. Grooming jobs are few and far between. And so those people might have really great skill at grooming, but it makes it more difficult for them to find jobs, and it makes the competition a little bit harder. So they had to be really good at grooming if they're going to work all the time, or like hair or cloth or that kind of thing. So it's usually a good idea to build a few skills in a few related areas. So like if you really are into modeling, then I would recommend learning texturing as well, and because those go hand in hand, and is also a great way to make sure your models look good in your portfolio. If you want to do rigging, then learn animation. If you want to do animation, learn some rigging. Lighting is always good for modeling and texture artists to learn as well. So I usually think it's like you want to get like 3 related skills that you're really good at, and then a bunch of other skills that you're pretty good at. Don't try and be great at everything, because that's nearly impossible. And you end up spreading yourself too thin. But being a generalist is a good idea. That helps get you work. The problem with being a generalist is that you have more time. You have to spend more time learning more different things, and so it's harder to, you see somebody who does like amazing character models. You're just like so jealous. You want to be like that person because they're so great at character models. But the problem is that there's not as much work for character models, especially when you have competition from things like metahumans and that kind of stuff. So it's tough. The easiest way to make money is to inherit it. Problem is that often requires a time machine. So you can go back in time and tell your parents to, invest in Apple or something. They made a movie about it starring Michael J. Fox. Okay, let's see. So what I'm going to do is let's split this into all the groups. Hello. My keyboard no worky. Okay. So I'm going to do geometry, Dynamesh, groups. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of funny because, I actually moved to Hollywood because of Gnomon, but that was back in 2005, and Gnomon was still pretty small back then, although it was well known. And I'd already been a CG artist for like 7 years, so it didn't make sense at the time for me to go into the full program. So I never actually did the full program, but what I did is I did a lot of classes sort of, a la carte, meaning, I took a John Brown sculpting class, and I took VizDev and some great other classes, and a bunch of them. Madeline Spencer's classes, that's where I met Ara and some other folks at Livestream. That's how I met. So I met a lot of people there, and then eventually I ended up actually starting to teach there. So I taught ZBrush for years, Intro to ZBrush, which is a lot of fun. And I taught Intro to Maya, which was fun too, and some creature design classes. So, and then while I was a teacher there, I took advantage of taking other classes like Nuke with Martin Hall and that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot of fun. But the only thing is I didn't have the advantage that the full-time students had, which is I didn't have the advantage of the faculty helping me to find a job. So I was doing freelance stuff, which I still do. But, it was a lot of fun. Louis Tucci was a student of mine way back in the day. We're still really good friends. I talk to him all the time. Actually, we're both in a movie together. So if you guys follow John Brown's Instagram, John Brown's a sculpture teacher, but he's also a director. He's Sculptor Dude 01 on Instagram, and he's been making this sci-fi cyberpunk movie called Black Rose, and I'm actually in it, which is fun. So is Louis Tucci. So is some folks from Maxon. Paul Gabry, Ian Robinson, all have roles in it, and some actual robots too. So you should check it out. It's fun. So that's the extent of my acting career. It's cool though. It's got robots. It's got cyborgs. It's got some ZBrush. Okay, let's see. This is kind of a cool detail right here. I'm just going to block that in really lightly. So again, we have, this is the coxa, and then I believe this is the trochanter, the femur, tibia. Notice it uses the same terminology up to here, and then we have the metatarsus and the tarsi, and then the claw foot. This is just a foot that fell off. Poor guy. Let's see. For somebody who was mentioning before that they were looking at getting more inspired in ZBrush. Inspiration, yeah, it's a tricky thing. I'm almost always up for ZBrushing, but I have a lot of things going on. Sometimes it's a good idea to, as the late great Joe Strummer would say, to have output, you must have input. So a great way to get inspiration if you're not feeling inspired is to read some books or go to a museum or go look at something that gets you excited. For me, obviously, it's bugs. I'll read books on bugs, or I'll go out and do some macro photography or something like that, and that gets me really inspired. Books especially get me inspired. I tend to read a lot of nonfiction, so I'll read a lot of science books and things like that, which you probably figured out. But other folks really love to read science fiction, and I think that's a big part of it. Some things will deflate your inspiration, so you have to be careful of that. Spending too much time looking at what other artists do sometimes can really kind of bring you down, because it seems like that everybody's better than you. That's a difficult thing to deal with. I mean, I struggle with that all the time. So it's good to watch what other artists are doing, but take a break from it every once in a while and look at the real world. You always want to kind of also figure out, what's something that's cool that not a lot of people are doing. And that's why I really started doing insects. Other than the fact that I'm inspired by them, it's just not that many people devoting this much time to doing insects in CG. There are some, and there's a few that are better than me. There's obviously a lot of artists that are better than me, but I'm talking about people who do specifically insects, creature designers and that kind of stuff. But compared to like character designers, there's kind of a nice niche to kind of exploit. I still do character models and other types of models as well, and every once in a while I actually get paid to do them, which is nice too. But look at those places, those unexplored places, because they do exist. There's a lot of stuff in this universe that hasn't been explored yet, and so keep your eye open for that, because that can give you some inspiration. Because one of the nice things about doing this kind of stuff, other than learning about insects, is that it's just maybe a better ZBrush artist, because I'm paying attention to detail and trying to solve problems, trying to figure out how to get things like this to work the way that I want it to, that requires learning the tools. So even though I'm not, this is kind of stuff that I can bring into other models that I do. I mean, I do a lot of working on props, scan data props for some jobs. It's not as glamorous, but it really helps you learn. Also pays the bills. So you could always go online to Sketchfab or a place like that, find some scan data. There's plenty of free models that people offer up there. There's some good stuff of insects. I mean, they're kind of like blobs, but they're still worth checking out. And download some of those things and practice cleaning them up and seeing what you can learn, because that's where you start to see all these weird things that you wouldn't notice otherwise. That's a great way to learn, and also to keep inspired. The thing about the industry is it changes with fashion. So, you know, like whatever's making a lot of money right now is probably what the industry is interested in, but it's hard to say how long that's going to last. So, like right now, everybody's talking about Fallout, right? Which is a great show. So there's a lot of sort of photorealism, stylistic, retro kind of stuff going on. Everybody's really into that. You know, I've been watching. I've had no choice because there's somebody in my house that is in control of the television. I'm no longer in control of television. So I've been watching a lot of Trolls and Mario Brothers movies and that kind of stuff. That stuff is really, really well done. In terms of animation, lighting, modeling, texturing, surfacing, and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to say because what's really trendy right now is not necessarily what people are working on. Of course, that can change in a whim. You might want to think in terms of like, what is a studio that you'd love to work for? What kind of stuff are they known for, right? So if you really love illumination and you love Minions and that kind of stuff, well, then you know you want to work on some cartoony stuff. If you love Bethesda games and all the movies made off of that, well, photorealism. So I'd say maybe a better thing is rather than trying to figure out what the industry is into, because that changes. And remember, a lot of those decisions are made by finance bros. You know, it's like the people who make the real creative decisions in Hollywoods. They're not MFAs, they're MBAs. They're the people with the money. And a lot of those guys don't know anything about art, and they do not care. The film industry has always been an industry that's interested in making money. So I would say look to the studios that you're most inspired in and use that as your guide as opposed to what's hot in the industry. That makes sense? What should we practice more? I'm learning 3D modeling and what to get in the industry, but don't know what to do with my portfolio. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I do a lot of scientific illustration, which most of the industry, Hollywood, doesn't care about, but I also do a lot of scientific visualization jobs, which pays pretty well. It pays okay, and I enjoy doing it. Your portfolio should, like think in terms of threes. How about that? So what I mean by that is, you know, don't do a portfolio that shows every kind of model you could possibly think of, right? Think of 3 things that you are interested in. Maybe characters, creatures, spaceships, right? That's 3 things, right? And spend some time and just go 1, 2, 3. Spend time on a project doing a character, then the next project, what did I say? Creature, do a creature, next project, do a spaceship. You know what I mean? And do that because then you'll have 3 and then it'll be 6 and then it'll be 9. And, you know, make sure that, you know, the stuff you do and that you show off in your portfolio is stuff that you're actually proud of. You know, avoid the temptation of putting stuff in your portfolio just because you did it. There's a whole lot of stuff that's not in my portfolio that I did either for a job or it was a long time ago and it's stuff that I had to weed out because it's not any good anymore. I mean, I still hate some of my portfolio and I hated it for a long time. I really hated it for a really long time. It's only recently that I've actually liked some of the stuff in there. You know, of course I'm breaking all the rules, you know, because my portfolio is all over the map, but I still have several themes to the stuff that I do. But yeah, avoid the temptation of putting in there something in there just because you did it. Put the stuff in there that you're proud of. And then also, another thing is, like, if you do work on a job, right? Let's say you get hired in an indie film or something like that, or a friend's film, or it's a small film, or even a big film, or a job, or, you know, and maybe you did one part of the model, right? Or maybe you did a model, but it didn't end up in the final. It was just used during the development. And you might think to yourself, well, it didn't end up in the final, so I'm not going to put it in my portfolio, even though it's a pretty good model and it did serve a purpose. Well, if you got paid to do it, you got paid to do it. So you can put it, as long as you have permission from the people you worked for, put it in your portfolio if it's good. You know what I mean? And just say, okay, this is a concept model, or this is an early version of the final model. I see people doing this all the time. Ian Joyner is a good example. You see a lot of his concept stuff in his portfolio, even if it didn't get used in the final, because you did get paid to do it. I mean, if you're doing like concept stuff, even if your concept isn't used in the final version, the whole point of the concept is you're helping the director and the creatives figure out what's going on in the movie or the game or whatever. So that still served a purpose, even though it didn't end up in the final version. So don't be afraid. Or if you worked on a part of something and somebody else worked on it, as long as you give the other people credit for what they did, put it in your portfolio, man. Don't be worried about that. If it's good. If it's not good, maybe think twice. I have some old stuff I should probably get rid of in my portfolio, but sometimes it's kind of nice to see where he came from as well. Okay, so I kind of made it exaggerated groove in there, so I'll probably change it a little bit later, but it's just kind of setting it up. If we look in here, it's a pretty hefty groove. So I got about 9 minutes left before I end my live stream for tonight. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this and my ramblings about the industry, and maybe gotten some good advice out of it, or some bad advice. Who knows? I can only speak from my experience. My career has been weird. There's always ups and downs. It's like when I worked at Bad Robot, that was so awesome, and then they closed it down. My next jobs were horrible. I mean, just stuff that I don't even want to admit that I had to do. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about porn, but, I almost probably would have been better off had I didn't do some porn. Because it was just like god-awful motion graphics stuff that was just looked terrible. It was no fun to do. It didn't pay very well. So, it just goes to show. At one point, I'm feeling like, oh, I'm on top of the world. I'm doing movie stuff, visual effects stuff. Literally seeing people like, J.J. Abrams and Steven Spielberg walk around, and stuff. And I'm like, I finally made it. And then bang, out on the street. And then bam, I'm doing crappy stuff that I don't want to admit that I'm doing. So careers go up and down. It's just the way it is, You just got to roll with it. Form a good network of friends that you like working with. That's the best advice I can ever give. Alright, so the guy looks pretty good. I didn't get a whole lot done tonight. Maybe I'll do a little bit of stuff offline and put it on my YouTube channel. But otherwise, I will be doing the same time next Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Pacific. Please, once again, check out my YouTube channel. Help me build a following. I know, like and subscribe, blah, blah, blah. It helps me out a lot, and also I like to hear the feedback. Let me bring it up again real quick. Don't look at my YouTube history. Here's my channel. Blue Patone. And I got a bunch of stuff on there, and I'm going to be adding even more. So check it out, subscribe. I'm also on Instagram, BluePatona01. And, send me a message or whatever. Let me know you watched the live stream, and I'll follow you as well. I've got a few more minutes, so I'll answer some questions. 1 minute. What kind of insect do you like more? Okay, so... Okay. It's something that really gets you inspired to sculpt. There's a lot of things, but one of the things that I absolutely love is I'll read like a biology textbook, a really good one, like graduate level, like invertebrate zoology. And there's diagrams in there, and the diagrams just get me really excited because they're such beautiful art. Like a really good scientific illustration gets me really excited. So that's something that I love. I like going to museums. I like going out in the field and taking pictures, macro photography. That gets me excited. Talking to actual entomologists and scientists. Those are the things that I get really, really excited about. I do have a love of fantasy and sci-fi. I'm just like everybody else, in this industry. So I'm starting to do that a little bit more because I've been doing so much science stuff for so long. I wanted to branch out. In terms of what type of insect do you do more, like I'm actually working on a bunch of fly models for a museum in Germany. Flies, no offense to flies, but they gross me out. My favorite models to do, I like bees and wasps are my favorite. Beetles, obviously, because there's so much diversity. They're so amazing. I do love arachnids, scorpions, whip scorpions, and pseudoscorpions are all some of my favorites. I'm hoping to do a scorpion fly at some point. And I've done a couple mantises. Those are always fun, too. Cool. I hope you enjoy the advice, and I hope it's useful. The industry is going through a massive change with, as you guys know, with AI and technologies is ramping up and getting faster and faster. One last piece of advice that I would give that's going to upset some people is, like it or not, get to know AI because it's your new coworker. That's all I can say is I resisted at first. I was very upset by artificial intelligence because, we love sculpting. We love doing things, right? We love making it. It sucks when you spend weeks on a model and then somebody who's never touched ZBrush before types in a prompt and they get something that looks gorgeous, right? But that being said, AI is going to be integrated into a lot of the software that we know and love. And it's just going to make some things faster, so embrace that. What I've been playing with for the past few months, ChatGPT or whatever, and what I've found is that, AI, it does really impressive stuff quickly, but it lacks imagination, and it can be really difficult to get it to do something very specific, and so for storyboard artists and concept artists, at first I was like, oh, those folks are out of business. But it's not really true because most art directors and directors of movies and creative projects, video games, they want something very, very specific. So what AI can help is drill down and get you some sketches really quickly so you can figure out what the director wants or what they don't want, and then you can use that as a jumping point. It just makes the conversation a lot faster so you can get to what you need to make it quicker. But it's going to be integrated into everything. So get to know it, hold your nose, and maybe it won't be so scary once we start to use it. So that's the other advice that I would give, because we kind of don't have a choice. There's going to be very few studios or projects that are going to be like, we refuse to use AI because it's natural selection, right? Yeah, I think that, if you think like I'm a big Star Trek Next Generation fan, and I was always a fan of the holodeck from way back when. And a lot of these super nerds, like I can tell you for a fact that the people at Otoy that make Octane jewels, those guys are trying to build the holodeck. That's their goal. They want real-time, completely immersive experiences that are just like the holodeck. And you cannot do that without AI, because we're talking about generating hundreds of characters and scenes and sets in real time, and that's their goal. So if you think about it that way, then it makes sense. If you think about it in terms of think about Unreal and now the ability to create procedural environments that go on infinitely for games, that's where AI is going to be kind of indispensable. And so we need to figure out how we can work with AI so that we're still in the creative control of that. Problem is that large part of the public just doesn't care, and they just want whatever is fast and cheap and entertaining. To quote Nirvana, it smells like Team Spirit. All right, guys. Thanks very much for listening to me ramble on incessantly, and hopefully next week I'll do more sculpting and less babbling. But I appreciate the questions, and thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time.